Donald Trump just made a promise that's mathematically impossible to keep. He swore he'd prevent the coming economic collapse. And here's the brutal truth nobody in Washington wants you to know. The convergence of crises building toward 2026 is bigger than any president. It's locked in by forces that transcend politics, transcend parties, and transcend even the most powerful leader on earth. This isn't about loving or hating Trump. This is about mathematical reality. And the mathematics are terrifying. Based on current data from the Federal Reserve, Treasury Department, and international economic forecasts, we're facing a perfect storm that no amount of presidential authority can prevent. The $50 trillion problem nobody talks about. Let me start with numbers that should keep you awake at night. Our official national debt just hit $38 trillion as of October 2025. That's $2 trillion higher than most people realize. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. When you add unfunded liabilities, Social Security promises, Medicare obligations, federal pensions, and state pension shortfalls, we're looking at over $50 trillion in commitments we cannot possibly meet. The Congressional Budget Office's latest projections show this gap widening by $2.2 trillion annually, not the $2 trillion I initially calculated. Trump knows this. Every president since Reagan has known this. But here's what they don't tell you. The system was designed to fail, and current economic forecasts show multiple pressure points converging between 2026 to 2027 that will make this mathematical impossibility impossible to ignore. Reason number one, the demographic death spiral is locked in. Every single day, 10,000 baby boomers turn 65. That's 3.6 million new retirees annually, all expecting Social Security checks, all needing Medicare coverage, all depending on a system that's running on mathematical fumes. The numbers are stark and unchangeable. In 1950, 16 workers supported every retiree. In 1990, 5 workers per retiree. Today, just 2.8 workers per retiree. By 2030, barely 2 workers carrying each retiree. The Social Security Trustees' 2025 report confirms the combined trust funds will be depleted by 2034, not 2026 as some predict. But the pressure is building now. Medicare's Hospital Insurance Trust Fund faces depletion by 2033. When these funds are exhausted, benefits automatically cut to 81% for Social Security and 89% for Medicare. Trump can't create workers out of thin air. He can't reverse 40 years of declining birth rates that dropped from 3.7 children per woman in 1960 to 1.7 today, well below the 2.1 replacement rate needed for population stability. Even if Trump opened immigration floodgates, which would destroy his political base, it would take decades for new workers to fully integrate and contribute meaningfully to the tax base. The demographic pyramid has already inverted, and no amount of presidential authority can change basic mathematics. Consider this. In 1960, there were 5.1 workers for every Social Security beneficiary. Today's 2.8 ratio means each worker must support 36% of a retiree's benefits. By 2035, at 2.3 workers per beneficiary, each worker carries 43% of retiree costs. The math simply doesn't work. Reason number 2, the Federal Reserve's impossible trap. Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve face what economists call the impossible trinity. They cannot simultaneously maintain price stability, full employment, and financial stability in the current environment. Here's their nightmare scenario. They're trapped between 2 economic disasters. Raise interest rates to fight inflation? They crash the economy instantly. Current research from the OECD shows Trump's proposed tariffs, with effective rates reaching 17 to 18.5%, the highest since the 1930s, will create additional inflationary pressure by 2026. Higher Fed rates combined with tariff inflation would mean businesses can't afford loans at 8 to 10% rates. Mortgages become unaffordable for 60% of potential buyers. Stock market valuations collapse as discount rates spike. Unemployment explodes as credit-dependent businesses fail. Keep rates low to support growth. Inflation continues destroying purchasing power. The dollar weakens against other currencies, and eventually, hyperinflation forces a crisis anyway. Recent Federal Reserve data shows core inflation still running above their 2% target, meaning they can't cut rates without risking renewed price spirals. The Fed painted themselves into this corner with 15 years of money printing and zero interest rates following the 2008 crisis. They created asset bubbles in stocks, bonds, and real estate that now require constant monetary support. Remove that support, and everything collapses. Continue it, and the currency collapses. Trump doesn't control the Fed. It's technically independent. But even if he did, both policy options lead to economic catastrophe. The Fed's own stress tests show major banks would face significant losses in either scenario. Reason number 3. The $38 trillion debt bomb is already exploding. Our national debt just hit $38 trillion and grows by $2.2 trillion every year, according to the latest Treasury data. But here's the killer. Interest payments alone now exceed $1.1 trillion annually. That's more than we spend on defense, more than most government programs combined. Let me break down the impossible mathematics using actual 2025 budget figures. Social Security, $1.4 trillion. Medicare, $1 trillion. Defense, $850 billion. Interest payments, $1.1 trillion. Total, $4.35 trillion in essentially untouchable spending. Our total federal revenue in fiscal 2025, about $4.7 trillion. That means 93% of all government revenue goes to just 4 items: debt service and 3 mandatory programs. Everything else, roads, education, veterans benefits, homeland security, the entire federal government apparatus, must be funded with the remaining 7% of revenue. Trump could fire every federal worker, eliminate every agency, shut down every program except these 4 items, and we'd still be spending 93% of all government revenue on just debt service and mandatory programs. To actually balance the budget, Trump would need to cut Social Security, Medicare, or defense by hundreds of billions. Political suicide. Social catastrophe. It's not happening. The debt service problem compounds exponentially. Every 1% increase in average interest rates adds roughly $380 billion to annual interest costs. With rates having risen from near 0 to over 5%, we're already seeing this mathematical death spiral accelerate. Reason number 4. The petrodollar system is already dead. For 50 years, America's economic dominance rested on one foundation. Every country needed dollars to buy oil. The 1974 agreement with Saudi Arabia created artificial global demand for our currency, allowing us to print money without immediate consequences. That system is dying before our eyes. Recent developments confirm the petrodollar's collapse. Saudi Arabia now accepts Chinese yuan for oil sales. Russia and China conduct 90% of their trade in local currencies. BRICS nations are building the BRICS bridge payment system to bypass SWIFT entirely. Iran, Venezuela, and other producers are abandoning dollar transactions. The BRICS payment system, while not yet a unified currency, represents a fundamental threat. This blockchain-based platform allows member countries to settle trades in central bank digital currencies and national currencies, completely bypassing the dollar. Current data shows Russia now conducts about 90% of its BRICS trade in local currencies. China's yuan now represents over 7% of global foreign exchange reserves, up from virtually 0 a decade ago. Trump can't force Saudi Arabia to only accept dollars. He can't make China use our currency. He can't prevent 40-plus countries from building dollar alternatives. The momentum toward de-dollarization has reached critical mass. When reserve currency status is lost, it doesn't come back. Ever. Ask Britain about the pound sterling, which lost reserve status in the 1940s and never recovered despite Britain remaining a major economy. Reason number 5. The commercial real estate apocalypse is unstoppable. Right now, $957 billion in commercial real estate debt is maturing in 2025 alone, nearly triple the 20-year average of $350 billion. This creates unprecedented refinancing pressure that no president can solve. The mathematics are brutal. Original loans were made at 3 to 4% interest rates. Current refinancing rates are 7 to 9%. Office occupancy has dropped 40 to 50% due to remote work. Retail spaces sit empty due to e-commerce growth. Property values have cratered 40 to 60% in major markets. Commercial mortgage-backed securities, CMBS, show delinquency rates of 7.29%, nearly 6 times higher than traditional bank loans. This signals severe distress in securitized commercial debt. Property owners facing refinancing can't make the new payments. A building worth $100 million in 2019 might be worth $60 million today, but still carries an $80 million loan. When that loan matures, the owner faces higher interest rates doubling debt service costs, lower property values preventing refinancing, reduced rental income from vacant spaces, no choice but default. Regional banks hold most of this commercial real estate debt. When defaults cascade through the system, we're looking at potentially hundreds of bank failures. Another 2008-style crisis concentrated in commercial real estate. Trump could attempt bailouts, but that just socializes losses while making the underlying problem bigger. The fundamental issue remains. These buildings aren't worth what they were. The loans can't be repaid, and someone must absorb the losses. Reason number 6. The $846 trillion derivatives time bomb. Here's a number that should terrify you. $846 trillion. That's the current size of the global over-the-counter derivatives market, according to the Bank for International Settlements' latest data, over 10 times larger than the entire world economy. These complex financial instruments are all interconnected, all based on assumptions about interest rates, currency values, and asset prices. When those assumptions break, the entire system can collapse in days. We witnessed this in 2008 with mortgage-backed securities. When housing prices fell, derivatives based on mortgages exploded, taking down banks like Lehman Brothers that weren't even primarily in the mortgage business. The interconnectedness meant failures cascaded through the entire global financial system. The derivatives market today is even more dangerous. Interest rate derivatives represent the largest segment at over $400 trillion notional value. Currency derivatives exceed $100 trillion, all based on dollar stability. Credit derivatives create counterparty risks that span continents. Commodity derivatives link energy, food, and materials markets globally. These instruments assume the dollar remains stable and dominant. Interest rates stay within historical ranges. Major economies don't face simultaneous crises. Counterparties remain solvent and liquid. When the dollar loses reserve status, when rates spike beyond model parameters, when multiple economies face crisis simultaneously, this $846 trillion house of cards collapses. Trump has zero control over this global shadow banking system. Most derivatives trade in London, Singapore, and other offshore markets beyond U.S. jurisdiction. The interconnectedness means a crisis anywhere becomes a crisis everywhere. Reason number 7. The money printing death spiral cannot stop. Here's the core issue that makes everything else inevitable. The federal government spent $1.8 trillion more than it collected in fiscal 2025. That gap must be filled somehow, and there's only one source: Federal Reserve money creation. The only way to fill this gap is for the Federal Reserve to create money out of nothing and buy government debt. They call it quantitative easing or monetary accommodation, but it's money printing to fund government spending. This printing causes inflation, destroying purchasing power and savings. But if the Fed stops printing, the government can't fund itself without massive spending cuts or tax increases. Trump faces an impossible choice: stop printing, trigger immediate government shutdown, benefit cuts, and economic collapse. Continue printing, guarantee currency devaluation and eventual hyperinflation. Every president chooses to keep printing because the alternative is political suicide. Trump will make the same choice, ensuring the dollar's destruction continues. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which was $800 billion before 2008, peaked at nearly $9 trillion during COVID money printing. Even after recent reductions, it remains at $7.4 trillion, nearly 10 times pre-crisis levels. Each dollar created reduces the value of existing dollars. With M2 money supply having grown over 40% since 2020, the purchasing power destruction is already locked in. More printing is inevitable because the government cannot function without it. The mathematical inevitability. These 7 factors create a perfect storm that no president can prevent. Demographics guarantee Social Security/Medicare bankruptcy by the mid-2030s. The Fed is trapped between recession and inflation with no good options. Debt service consumes 93% of government revenue, leaving no room for cuts. Dollar dominance is ending as BRICS builds alternative systems. Commercial real estate collapse is triggering regional bank failures. $846 trillion in derivatives create systemic risk beyond government control. Money printing must continue, guaranteeing currency destruction. Each problem feeds the others in an accelerating death spiral. Demographic pressure increases spending requirements. Higher spending requires more debt issuance. More debt means higher interest payments. Higher payments require more money printing. More printing weakens the dollar internationally. A weaker dollar accelerates global de-dollarization. De-dollarization reduces demand for dollars. Reduced demand forces more printing to fund the same spending. The cycle accelerates until mathematical collapse. This death spiral began decades ago and cannot be stopped by any individual, no matter how powerful or well-intentioned. What Trump will actually do. When the crisis hits, and current economic forecasts suggest elevated risks in 2026 to 2027, Trump will try to manage it through predictable responses. Massive stimulus packages. Trump will push for direct payments to ease immediate pain, just as he did during COVID, with $1,200 stimulus checks. This will feel good, short-term, but accelerate inflation, long-term. Federal Reserve pressure. He'll demand the Fed keep rates low to stimulate growth, as he did throughout his first term. But low rates during inflation is gasoline on a fire. Debt restructuring. Trump might attempt to renegotiate federal debt terms or offer bondholders partial payment, applying his business experience with over-leveraged companies. But doing this at a national level would destroy U.S. credibility and crash the dollar. Capital controls. To prevent money from fleeing the country, Trump might restrict currency conversion or international transfers. This is what governments do when their currency is in crisis. And it's a sign things are really bad. Blame campaigns. Trump will target China, past administrations, the Federal Reserve, or Congress. This is political theater to deflect responsibility, not economic policy. Currency reform. In extreme scenarios, Trump might push for a gold-backed dollar, a new digital currency, or membership in a reformed international monetary system. This would be the most radical option, but might be necessary if the dollar completely collapses. These actions might delay the worst effects temporarily, but they cannot prevent the mathematical inevitability of collapse. Some responses, like more stimulus and rate pressure, actually accelerate the underlying problems. The timeline is set. Based on current trajectories and economic forecasting, the critical convergence happens between 2026 to 2027. 2026 pressure points. Commercial real estate defaults peak with $1.8 trillion in loans maturing. Trump's tariff policies create additional inflationary pressure. BRICS payment systems become fully operational. Federal debt service approaches $1.2 trillion annually. 2027. Convergence of multiple regional bank failures from commercial real estate. Inflation resurges from continued money printing. International dollar demand drops significantly. Demographic pressure on entitlements intensifies. 2030s. Crisis, Social Security Trust Fund depletion, 2034. Medicare hospital insurance depletion, 2033. Automatic benefit cuts trigger social unrest. Full-scale monetary and fiscal crisis. Could it happen sooner? Yes, if external shocks accelerate the timeline. Could it be delayed slightly? maybe through extreme measures that make the eventual crisis worse. But the window is narrow. Current economic analysis suggests 12 to 30 months before multiple crises converge into systemic collapse. Your survival strategy. Since no president can save you, you must save yourself. Here's your action plan based on historical crisis patterns. Immediate actions, next 12 months. Convert dollars to hard assets. Gold, silver, productive real estate, dividend-paying stocks in essential industries. Eliminate variable rate debt before interest rates spike further. Build cash reserves. 6 to 12 months expenses in physical cash and precious metals. Develop practical skills, plumbing, electrical work, gardening, mechanical repair. Establish food security. 3 to 6 months of non-perishable food storage. Medium-term positioning. 12 to 24 months. Multiple income streams. Don't depend on single employment source. International diversification. Assets in stable foreign currencies and markets. Energy independence, solar panels, generators, alternative heating. Community networks, relationships with neighbors, local farmers, skilled tradespeople. Physical security, personal protection, and property security measures. Long-term wealth preservation. Productive assets. Farmland, rental properties, businesses providing essential services. Inflation hedges, assets that maintain value during currency debasement. Skill monetization, abilities that generate income regardless of economic conditions. Barter capabilities, goods and services for non-monetary exchange. Geographic flexibility, ability to relocate if local conditions deteriorate. Timeline, preparation. Use the next 12 to 24 months to position yourself before the convergence hits. Don't wait for political solutions that cannot exist mathematically. Opportunity recognition. Every crisis creates winners and losers. Those positioned correctly can build generational wealth. Asset fire sales, real estate, stocks, and businesses selling at massive discounts. Currency arbitrage, profits from dollar weakness against hard assets. Essential services, businesses providing food, energy, security, and basic needs. New systems, early adoption of post-dollar monetary arrangements. The Great Depression made some people very rich. The 2008 crisis created billionaires. Every crisis rewards those who prepare and position correctly. The brutal truth. Trump cannot stop this crash because it was never about Trump. It was never about any president. This is the mathematical result of 50 years of accumulated bad decisions, structural problems, and demographic realities that transcend politics. The crash building toward 2026 to 2027 is not a political event. It's a mathematical inevitability driven by unsustainable debt mathematics, $38 trillion growing by $2.2 trillion annually. Demographic impossibilities, 2.8 workers supporting each retiree dropping to 2.3. Monetary system breakdown, global abandonment of dollar-based trade, financial system over-leveraging, $846 trillion in derivatives based on false assumptions. Commercial real estate collapse, $957 billion in underwater loans maturing. Federal Reserve policy failure, trapped between recession and inflation. Political system paralysis, inability to make necessary but painful choices. No amount of deal-making, executive orders, or presidential authority can overcome these mathematical realities. The momentum is unstoppable. This isn't about Trump being weak or incompetent. This isn't about him not caring or not trying. This is about the limits of presidential power when facing mathematical certainties that have been building for decades. If you're counting on Trump to save the economy, you're going to be disappointed. If you're counting on any president, any party, any government action to prevent the crisis, you're going to be disappointed. The only person who can save you is you. The only protection you have is your own preparation. The only security you can count on is what you build yourself. Conclusion. The coming crash isn't about Trump failing, it's about the limits of presidential power when facing mathematical certainties. Whether you love him or hate him, is irrelevant to the economic forces that will reshape America over the next 3 years. Current economic data, from the $38 trillion national debt to the $846 trillion derivatives market, from the $957 billion in maturing commercial real estate loans to the demographic crisis hitting Social Security, all point to the same conclusion. The system cannot be saved through political action. Your financial survival doesn't depend on who occupies the White House. It depends on your own preparation, your own decisions, and your own actions taken before the mathematical inevitabilities converge. The system cannot be saved, but you can save yourself. Stop waiting for political solutions. Start building your own economic fortress. The mathematics are clear, the timeline is set, and the convergence is coming. The only question is, will you be ready?